joining us this morning for the broadcast. And of course, we are this morning talking about what the rest of the nation is talking about. And that's, of course, the grand jury with no indictment for the officer that shot Michael Brown in Ferguson. And I think the most troubling thing that I heard this morning, although it did not surprise me, is that the rioting and the looting was worse than it was just a few months ago. So, I wish that just having a discussion about it, we could somehow come up with a solution, so things like this don't happen anymore, so that things don't get out of hand like this, so that there's some justice for people who feel there hasn't been any. And but unfortunately, I just don't think there's any.
There's already been tragedy with losing this young man. Why create more?
Well,
can't you do something else positive with your angry energy? I don't know. I think there's a different solution to this.
Yeah. Mike Brown's parents called for peace. All the religious leaders called for peace. It always frustrates me when there's just a minute contingency in these people who are going to get out there and cause this havoc. Lisa, were you in LA during the Rodney King riots?
I wasn't.
See,
no,
I was there, and I remember seeing the fires off in the distance. Those riots went on for 4 days before the police finally moved in. People are angry, and they feel sometimes like this is the only way they'll be heard. I think there are better ways. I don't think you can ever condone what happened last night in Ferguson, but people are angry.
They are, and you mentioned condoning it, and it brings to mind a quote from Martin Luther King that rioting is the language of the unheard.
Right.
And I feel like, is that statement a way to condone some people's actions? Well, I'm unheard and this is my language, so it's okay.
I don't think so. I don't think the people who were out there looting stores last night care what Dr. King had to say.
I'd like him to say I'd like for him to have said language is rioting is the language of the ignorant.
But it also depends on how you define rioting. Protesting, rioting, the words get thrown around a lot. There were a lot of people out there trying to peacefully demonstrate last night.
Protesting, though, totally different than
completely
rioting.
Different. Yeah. But people are angry. People need to understand this is not just about Ferguson.
Yeah.
This is about Trayvon Martin. This is about a 12-year-old with an airsoft gun who was killed over the weekend by police officers. This is about the young man in New York who was killed by a rookie police officer for being in a stairwell. I mean, this is about the man who was choked to death. This is not just about Ferguson, and people are angry. They're tired of unarmed black men being killed seemingly without repercussion.
Don't you feel like, though, a lot of this has been fed by the media?
No.
I do. If you look back on the last several months, even when this thing was in jury and it was not a lot was going on, the media continues to feed and feed and feed this
like
stuff.
Like Benghazi?
Continues to feed this stuff where people become irate.
Yeah.
It's in my opinion, completely media driven.
I see what you're saying, that the media is driving it and making people irate. I understand that, but as far as making it even worse, I think they're just showing the pictures, and I don't see how that's
But think about it. There's been other shootings. Other police officers have shot at people since this time,
and they've been on the news.
Not really.
I've seen them.
Not to this level. And I think a lot of people.
She just mentioned a handful of them.
But I think a lot of people feel like I do, and that is this is very media driven, and we're tired of it being completely.
You're tired of hearing about it.
Well, yeah. So imagine people living it every day. I think about my nephew. I'm going to start crying. I have a nephew. I don't know if Carrie has that picture that I sent her this morning, who my sister has had to have a conversation with this 19-year-old kid about what he can do when he's out in public, and if he's approached by a police officer, how he needs to respond, because he's black and he's a young black male, he has to respond a certain way.
Yeah.
Young black teens, male teens, are 21 times more likely to be killed by police than a white teen. So there is a racial issue here, and what are we doing to stop it? We've decided that being a young black teen makes you so inherently dangerous that if you're unarmed, somebody's afraid enough of you that it's okay to take your life. And at what point in time is that going to stop?
I don't know, and I think that's the question: is when does it stop? What do we
It
do to
has
help
to
it stop?
stop.
But it's a stereotype
Yes.
issue. Okay, so
Yes.
here's what I'll say also, and I do think it is so ridiculous and so unfair that young black men automatically have to act differently, have to dress themselves differently. They have to be aware of that. But I will say, not just for black men, for Hispanic men,
Absolutely.
for white men who look a certain way, and go
Absolutely.
with me on this, okay? And I'm just going to put it out here because we're talking stereotypes. If you are tattooed up, if you are pierced up, if your pants are down around the ground, if you look like a thug, then police are going to treat you differently.
Right.
Unfortunately, if you are black, you tend to look that way just because of the color of your skin where police are concerned.
I
And that
disagree.
is,
I disagree.
well, I mean, how can you though?
feel-
Look at all the statistics, and I think it's sickening.
I know
I just don't
plenty
like that
of.
like this.
Go ahead.
Like again, this is a tragedy. Why does it have to be a race issue? Can't it just be sad that this poor boy was killed? Why does it have to be like
Because
this young African American?
Because they're 21 times more likely to be killed
Where
than
is
a
that
white
statistic?
teen. I found it from a legal analyst over the weekend. And so, it's one of those things where we can say, I'm so tired of talking about race, but the reality is there are people being killed in the United States because of their race. So not talking about it and ignoring the problem is not going to make it go away.
Not because of their race, but because of what people think they are because of their race.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And that needs to change. That has to
it's
stop.
2015, and it's so sad to me that we do have to say, oh, a young black kid was killed. It's sad that a child was killed.
Exactly.
Like, people need to get over it. Not get over the loss of this child, but get over the race thing.
But it's not. It's
Let
not
it
going to
go.
go.
Yeah.
Listen,
Let
you
it
can't
go.
tell black people to let go of race. I walk outside every day. I look in
But
the
when-
mirror. I am a black woman. I don't. And it's not playing the race card. It's who I am. Don't tell people to get over their race. Don't tell people to get over the fact that they are being
Well, then how-
affected by because of their race. That
And how
has to
can-
stop.
How can our society move on as a whole if you're saying they cannot get over their race?
Amy, we had a conversation at this table a couple months ago, and you said you have no problem letting your sons play with those airsoft guns.
I don't.
Why? Because no one would ever call the police on them.
That's bull.
A 12-year-old boy was killed this weekend because of it.
I'm gonna let you know that the police absolutely will come up to those children
Okay.
that are white.
All right.
No, don't be sarcastic.
No,
Yes.
I think it's ridiculous. But okay, if you want to say that as a mother of a white boy playing with an airsoft gun, that your challenges are the same for a young black boy's mom, I think you need a reality check, and you maybe need to go spend some time in the hood.
Okay.
So there.
Well,
I have no comment because
Good.
it's
okay, let's move on from this topic. Coming up next, let's talk about family relationships, or maybe the relationships with people that you work with, and how to improve them or repair them this holiday season. We're going to give you some tips when we come back.
Let me give you a tip. Don't point. It's very rude.